police department's senior lead officer concept. Each of these senior lead officers serve as the senior staff members that staff the area planning commissions and therefore provide that communication, that liaison role to share department news and to take concerns, questions, issues back to the department for further research and investigation. So what we expect to do is in the upcoming weeks before full City Council to bring the GEO team leaders before the Council to introduce them to the full group and to make a more full presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And Councilmember Labange, sleeves rolled up and everything.
At the Edward Roybal hearing room in the Public Works. Mr. LeGrand, good to see you. Under the leadership of the department and a suggestion that you know, Mitch, is so valuable, the senior lead program LAPD has. If you could ask, let's just do an instant poll real quick. How many of you know your senior lead officer in your area? Look at that. That's a pretty good number of hands from people.
How many know you're a council member?
Who's more valuable, senior lead or the council member? You know the senior lead is.
And since we're on this, I've often wondered, how many know your school board member?
Very good.
Nobody. Not one.
So that being said, with Mr. LeGrand, over the course of time, and Lisa developed this program so that they have senior leads, because you get the City Hall shuffle often, and it's not on purpose, but it just happens. So basically, in talking to Mr. LeGrand and reintroducing this motion, it would come to council because so many of our new members would know about this, and hopefully other departments will take note and develop the senior lead ranger, senior lead sanitation, whatever the case may be. So the public has a better contact. We understand the concept. It brings government closer to the people. And the planning department certainly wants to do that because it is a very significant thing. Next to animals, and God bless all animals, to get more calls, right, Don, about a zoning case after anything to do with animals. So I just want to let you know, people love animals more than they do zoning. But that's another thing. So that's all I got to say. Any questions of me?
You are our senior leader on the council.
Oh, cut it out there, Mitch. Thank you so much. That's only because of time, that's all. So it's an honor to serve with all of you, to serve the people. So we'll schedule with Mr. Wesson a time that they get about 7 to 11 minute briefing. And I'll tell you, Mr. LeGrand will tell you, the collaboration of planning deputies are so important to have and work as a team together as we deal with issues. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Labange.
Okay, adios.
Adios. Popped out of nowhere. Thank you, Mr. Labange.
He does that.
Yeah. And so we'll send this item to full council as a note and file. Okay, and we'll hear it in council. So without any objection, so ordered. Next item.
Next item is item 4. It's a draft ordinance to create the Beverly Grove Residential Floor Area District.
Good afternoon, council members. Connie Pelini-Tipton, City Planner, with Brian Eck, Planning Assistant for the Department of City Planning. We're here to present the proposed Beverly Grove RFA, which is a supplemental use district enabled by the baseline mansionization ordinance. Brian is here to present the details of this zoning tool, which enables the city to regulate housing size in a more tailored manner. And I'd like to hand it over to Brian now. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Good afternoon, council members. Before you today is a proposed ordinance to establish a residential floor area, or RFA, overlay district for the Beverly Grove neighborhood. The proposed ordinance would apply to all single-family zoned parcels along 5 streets, Colgate Avenue, Drexel Avenue, West 5th Street, Lindenhurst Avenue, and Maryland Drive, all between San Vicente to the west and Fairfax to the east. And the area is within the Wilshire Community Plan and Council District 5. So a residential floor area district allows individual single-family neighborhoods to tailor specific regulations related to home size to help ensure that new development matches both the scale and the character of the existing area. The RFA tool itself was created as part of the 2008 Baseline Mansionization Ordinance, which was developed in part to address concerns about out-of-scale development in Beverly Grove, in addition to concerns citywide. In the years since the adoption of the Baseline Mansionization Ordinance, out-of-scale development has continued to occur in the neighborhood, and in response, Council approved a motion directing the Planning Department to study a potential RFA for Beverly Grove in late 2011. The proposed RFA ordinance in front of you today was developed by the City Planning Department to help ensure that new development matches the scale and the character of the neighborhood by lowering the allowable base floor area ratio and creating incentives for bonus FAR for homes that include design features that match the existing context. The Beverly Grove neighborhood was largely developed in the 1920s, and the development pattern is typical of the area. So it includes a detached garage built to the rear of the lot. And most of the neighborhood parcels have this feature, and in response of this character defining feature for the neighborhood, the RFA ordinance incentivizes detached garages, but does not mandate new construction to include this. This helps ensure that the character of the neighborhood is reinforced, that new homes relate to existing homes, and the scale of Beverly Grove is respected. The proposed ordinance was developed with an extensive amount of public outreach, which included small group focus group meetings, a large public workshop, where the community evaluated 6 potential RFA concepts, provided feedback to the department, and then a large open house and public hearing with 200 community members who participated, with 80 speakers giving testimony on the matter. The exact mechanics of the proposed ordinance would bring the allowable home size closer to what exists in the neighborhood today. So the base allowable FAR is lowered modestly from 0.5 to 0.42, and the maximum allowable lowered from 0.6 to 0.5. Additionally, the floor area calculation would be altered to reflect the conditions of the neighborhood. Under current regulations, a property that has maximized the allowable development with bonuses and exemptions could exceed 4,400 square feet. By comparison, the average home in the neighborhood is closer to 2,140 square feet. The proposed ordinance would allow for a modest increase over the existing home size to 3,050 square feet. So in total, the RFA ordinance creates neighborhood-tailored regulations to address scale, massing, and articulation of new development and major renovations. The ordinance still allows for flexibility, modernization, and new construction, but provides incentives for bonus floor area ratio that will help ensure that new development reinforces the established character of the neighborhood. And thank you. We're available for questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions? No questions for now. We'll go to public comment. Thank you.
Thanks.
Charles Tarlow.
I'm Charles Tarlow, longtime resident of the Beverly Grove. Before you put your names in support to this unwanted and onerous RFA, you should know a few things. First and foremost, the people who work, own property in the area do not want this RFA. I've submitted to the committee, and you can look at it, statements from the majority, representing the majority of properties in the area, who unequivocally do not want this onerous RFA. The only reason we're here today is politics. The proponents of this RFA don't have enough neighborhood support to even apply to the city for an RFA. They're here because Paul Koretz was willing to bypass the requirement for neighborhood support. Brian Eck just made a statement about what size home we get. And he's saying we could build 3,000 square feet. But what he's not telling you is this RFA includes non-living space areas, attached garage, balconies, covered porches, breezeways. If you hired me to buy a 3,000 square foot house for you and I gave you a 2,400 square foot house, you would sue me. And then you can't represent that as a 2,400 square foot house. I'm nervous, so I'm not hitting my main points. But there seems to be a question about whether we want this or not. The RFA in its current form was never sent out to the neighborhood. Nobody has asked us, do we want this in an up and down vote? And I don't know if you have the power or courage to tell the planning department, send this out to our neighborhood as in its final form and say, do we want it? I'm sure they won't get it. Koretz points to his survey as there's an appearance of support, but by his own numbers, he doesn't have 30% of the neighborhood. He has 60% of his survey, which misrepresented the neighborhood, saying he wanted to stop the building of 4,700 square foot homes, and he wanted an opinion on a 3,400 square foot overlay, when the limit is 3,600 square feet under current law, and the overlay he was really asking for was 2,400 square feet. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jason Needleman. After Jason is Shelly Wagers.
Good afternoon. My name is Jason Needleman. I'm a homeowner in Beverly Grove and an officer of the Beverly Wilshire Homes Association. The Beverly Wilshire Homes Association has submitted material in support of the RFA ordinance, including an urgency clause. To summarize, stopping mansionization is a stated policy of the City Planning Commission, as well as the city's general plan and zoning code. One of the provisions of the baseline mansionization ordinance is the option to establish an RFA district in neighborhoods where the baseline mansionization ordinance has failed. Well, that is clearly the case in Beverly Grove. 10% of houses have been replaced with McMansions over the past decade. 3/4 of these McMansions have been built since the BMO took effect, baseline mansionization ordinance. All were permitted by right, and none needed variances. These McMansions violate the character and scale of Beverly Grove and deprive neighboring houses of privacy, air, and sunlight. All of these are criteria for establishing an RFA district. This was reflected in a survey conducted by our council office in which broad support for this RFA was demonstrated. We are very supportive of the ordinance as written. It hits the so-called sweet spot by setting a limit 15% larger than the formula used in the survey that the council office sent out, and about 1,000 square feet larger than the average older home. So that will still be allowed under the RFA, about 1,000 square feet larger than existing homes. In other words, the RFA both protects the neighborhood and allows homeowners ample opportunity to improve their properties. It also substantially reduces the carbon footprint of excessively large houses, consistent with city and state policies. We urge adoption. Thank you.
Thank you. Shelly Wagers, then Michael Conway.
Thank you. I'm Shelly Wagers. My husband and I own and live in a home in Beverly Grove, and we support the RFA ordinance. In the interests of time, many RFA supporters here today will not speak, but I'm going to ask them to please stand for a moment and make their presence felt. Thank you. So, we want to put the ordinance in context. Councilmember Koretz conducted the only legitimate survey of public opinion, the only impartial and legitimate survey. The response was tremendous. Over 60% of respondents supported the formula proposed in his survey. I believe that Mr. Bayless, his planning representative, will discuss that in detail in a moment. The motion and the ordinance coming out of that survey allow homes to be built 15% bigger than the formula in the survey, and again about 1,000 square feet bigger than the average older home in the neighborhood. So the ordinance that you're considering today is fair and reasonable and valid, and it's fully consistent with city policies and guidelines. As we speak, mansionization is going along at a rip-roaring pace. Every week brings more destruction, and it's important to understand that the McMansions will litter the landscape long after the speculators have moved on. So we need the RFA, and we need it at the earliest possible time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Just a side note, Mr. LeGrand, where did the term McMansion, how do we coin that term? I mean, we know what it means, but where did it come from? McDonald's.
I think Councilman Cedillo said it right. McDonald's supersizing. I think it was a term just in land use. We started seeing these very large mansions built on single-family lots where traditionally we had larger side yard setbacks, rear yard setbacks, parking garages many times in the rear of the property. And you started to see larger and larger homes, mostly on speculation builders, where they come in and tear down a house and gut the lot and then start from scratch and just maximize the lot with square footage of the home.
Did the city of LA coin that term, or?
I don't think so.
It's heard,
I think,
or is it heard?
Yeah, I think it's been around nationally.
Michael Conway and Rochelle Ventura.
Hi, thank you. I am Michael Conway. I own and live in Beverly Grove, and I support the RFA. Most Beverly Grove homeowners and residents care deeply about property rights and support the RFA. That's because we understand that property rights are not necessarily absolute. We live on small city lots, and we do not have the right to keep horses in our backyard. We do not have the right to throw loud, raucous parties 6 nights a week. And we do not have the right to replace our single-family homes with multi-tenant apartment buildings. And we should not have the right to replace our homes with houses the size of apartment buildings. For the record, a recent guest at my home actually mistook a nearby McMansion for an apartment building. No one should have the right to throw up enormously out-of-scale houses that loom over their neighbors and steal their air, light, and privacy. I support the Beverly RFA because it protects my property rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rochelle Ventura, Rosanne Canaan.
Hello. My name is Rochelle Ventura, and I have lived in the Beverly Grove area for over 70 years. I am in total support of the RFA ordinance before you, as are my friends and neighbors that I have spoken to. And today I want to briefly talk just about one aspect of it, the attached garages. I have 5 points to make. Attached garages are not in keeping with the scale or character of the neighborhood. They were never part of the original homes for this area, most of which are still standing and being enjoyed by the residents. They really detract from the aesthetics of the area. 2, the attached garages add 400 square feet of massive bulk to the front of the house. The 20-foot wide garages take up half the front elevation. What you see from the street is a flat garage door. 3, the attached garages eliminate the traditional driveway that serves as a buffer between our homes. Our lots are small. We need this buffer. 4, the double-width driveways created by the attached garages permanently reduce curb space. They eliminate 1 parking space in front of the house and therefore reduce the available street parking in the neighborhood. And 5, there is good precedent for this. The Mount Washington Glasgow Park Specific Plan, in effect since 1993, also counts the square footage of the attached garages towards the total of the house. To be clear, the proposed RFA ordinance still allows attached garages, but counts them as part of the square footage of the house, as it should be. Enforcement would be simple and straightforward. The requirement that the square footage of attached garages be counted as part of the house in the Beverly Grove RFA is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Rosanne Canaan, Diana Plotkin.
I'm Rosanne Canaan. I live in Beverly Grove and own a home there. I support the RFA. The city's Green LA Action Plan vows to set, quote, smart new standards for green building and land use planning, close quote. The new City of Los Angeles housing element, part of the legally mandated general plan, calls for sustainable development policies and programs that support conservation and reduce demand. Oversized houses do the opposite. They hog resources. They worsen the storm runoff. They guzzle energy. It makes no sense to grant extra square footage and high ceilings for features like bamboo floors or garage plugs for future electric vehicles. What's more, the demolitions that precede construction in our neighborhood cut corners. They invariably rip out mature trees, throw up clouds of asbestos, and treat other building materials recklessly. The Beverly Grove RFA eliminates rewards for phony green building. We need to fulfill the city's pledge as stated to support conservation and reduce energy demand. We need the Beverly Grove RFA. Thank you.
Thank you. Diana Plotkin, Richard Plotkin.
Good evening. Good afternoon, I should say. Councilmember Huszar, and congratulations on your appointment. My name is Diana Plotkin, and I'm president of the Beverly Wilshire Homes Association, and we've represented this area for over 50 years. The people who live in this area want the RFA. We are asking you to move this forward very quickly with the emergency clause in it. This is something that our councilman promised this community when he first ran for office, because he heard so many complaints about these mansions going up on either side of these homes that are, normal-sized homes. He has worked very closely with us, with the community, with the planning department, and we're asking you, please get this out of committee and to city council with the emergency clause as quickly as possible, so we have no more of the tearing down of these wonderful old homes to build these ugly old mansions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Richard Plotkin, Robert Chernow.
I'm Richard Platkin. My wife and I live in a home in Beverly Grove, and we support the Beverly Grove RFA and the emergency clause. Some contractors and realtors have argued that the RFA will harm property values. Not by a long shot. Councilmember Koretz addressed this point in a letter to Beverly Grove homeowners and residents. He wrote, Beverly Grove is surrounded by neighborhoods with more restrictive HPOZs where property values have not diminished, and RFAs exist elsewhere in Studio City and in Sunland Tujunga without any detrimental impacts on property values. In fact, areas all over the region and the country set limits on house size similar to this very RFA. That's because compatible development maintains stable long-term property values, and neighborhood character adds market value. The ordinance will protect homeowners in a variety of ways. It will safeguard the character of the neighborhood, it will protect our privacy and light, and as the above examples illustrate, it will protect our property values as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Robert Chernow.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm a land use consultant in Southern California, and I've represented hundreds of cases in this neighborhood. I've gotten to know a lot of the community long-term residents. These are not transitional people. These are people who have lived for decades in this community. They're not asking you to restrict no development in the area. They're asking you to put reasonable restrictions on it so that their homes are not overwhelmed by these mega mansions. We're talking about privacy issues here. We're talking about quality of life. And all they're asking is that they not be denied their rights to live and enjoy their properties. And we're hoping that it's made very clear to these developers that they're welcome to come in, but we don't want them overwhelming the long-term residents. And we're asking for the help of the City Council here to assure that that happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Representing Council District 5, Sean Bayless.
Sean Bayless, Planning and Land Use Deputy for Councilmember Paul Koretz. Appreciate everyone for coming out here today, and thank you, council members, for your attention to this matter. We've been working on this for about 3.5, 4 years. Folks in the audience have been working on this or something similar to this for even longer. It's taken us a while to get here, but as was stated before, we think we've hit the sweet spot on this proposal. The council member concerned with the community input portion of this sent out a notice to every homeowner in the proposed RFA area. We actually had a majority of folks in that area respond, which was tremendous, actually, with over 60% of the folks that responded saying that they liked the idea of this RFA. We've had numerous meetings in our office. We've had numerous community meetings. The planning department did an outstanding job at reaching out, giving folks different options, ideas. We had workshops. We then had the community hearing. We then went to the City Planning Commission with the very ordinance that's in front of you today. The City Planning Commission voted to uphold or support and move that ordinance along unanimously. Councilmember Koretz asks that this move forward as well. We support the City Planning Commission's recommendation for this ordinance, and just want to thank everyone that's been spending a lot of time working on this. It's an important issue. There is a dramatic effect that these homes have, these new oversized homes have on this community, and we see it happening at an accelerated rate. Because of that, we are also asking for the urgency clause to be attached to this. We are quite literally seeing a tremendous uptick in the amount of building permits that are being requested for demolition of homes in the area as we move ever so closer to hopefully approving this ordinance. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? No? Mr. Englander?
Just briefly, is there anybody who's, and besides looking at the briefing book that was put together, by the way, the Beverly Grove Alliance book, who did this? Very impressive. A lot of information. Do you want to volunteer in an office, or this is fantastic. This is great. This is quite a bit of information that you've all collected here, and my grandmother grew up right down the street from here as well, so I know the area well, and it's amazing to me because I grew up going there as a kid, and you go there now, and it's just so different, and you see where the name McMansionization comes from, because they engulf a community. I mean, you shoehorn one of these things in to a small area of character, and I look at some of the streets here. When my wife and I bought our first house, it was in Glendale because we couldn't afford much more, but it was an area. The streets looked just like this, and you drive down the street, and then all of a sudden you see a house that's 5,000 or 6,000 square feet shoehorned in on a 2,000, what was set for a 2,000 square foot home at best. It's just unreasonable. And I know there's been a lot of struggle over the years, for many years, to try to figure out how to get our arms around this, because it just doesn't happen in just this area. And I believe this just affects this area now, is what's being proposed, or is it citywide?
No, it's just this area. 700 single-family homes will be affected.
Just this area.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to do something citywide, because we see this area, this is going on throughout the San Fernando Valley and in other places as well, in other communities. And we've got to have some of these protections in place. And so where some places they do make sense. A lot of people want McMansions. I mean, there are places along the beach that have changed along, in Venice. Not that I'm proposing we do anything there differently, because that councilman will call screaming at me in a moment, I'm sure. But but it sounds like that I'm all for having some of these protections, and I want to thank all you for doing all the work, and particularly also Councilmember Koretz as well, because I know he's set out to try to come up with that balance and toughen the laws and making sure that we protect the character of neighborhoods. So, thank you.
Well, where is I know we discussed this, it was a big issue for a while in the city about McMansions and controlling that. I think we did something for hillsides, correct? We do have a policy for hillsides. Yeah.
Yes, Connie Pelini-Tipton. Yes, we do have the baseline mansionization ordinance as well as the hillside mansionization ordinance.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? So we'll recommend, if my colleagues agree, to move this item, approve the RFA, and send to council with an urgency clause as suggested, requested by Council District 5. And
actually, Councilman, you need to instruct planning and the city attorney to prepare the final ordinance before you transmit it to the council.
Okay.
And also to include the urgency clause.
We'll do that. Does that mean it comes back to committee with the ordinance, or does it, can it go to council?
You have that option, or you can always waive it out of committee and send it directly to the council.
We'll send it directly to council with, and instruct the
Planning and city attorney.
planning and city attorney to prepare the ordinance with the urgency clause.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. So ordered. Thank you. Next item, please. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Thanks. Next item.
Next item, council members, is an appeal by Risa Sarati. She's appealing the decision of the West LA as it relates to a track map and also a reduction in open space for a one-lot subdivision for an 8-unit condo project in CD 11.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Jose Carlos Romero, a Deputy Advisor Agency. Let's see. I will be brief in my presentation, and I will be available for any questions after the appellant makes his case. The project location is 11764 West Idaho Avenue and 1601 Stoner Avenue in the West Los Angeles Community Plan. The project request is, as was said, is an 8-unit condominium development. The land use designation on the site is medium, and the zoning designation on the site is R3 with a height district of 1. On June 7, 2013, the advisory agency approved the project tentative track number 71891 for 8-unit condominium on the grounds that the project was consistent with the community plan, was consistent with the zoning. And also the director planning approved a director's decision allowing the project reduction of no more than 10% in open space. These decisions were appealed by a member of the community, and it went to the Area Planning Commission. On July 17, 2013, the Area Planning Commission held a meeting, disagreed with staff, and the Area Planning Commission granted the appeal in part, reduced the height of the building to 3 stories. Also, the Area Planning Commission overturned the director's decision on the on the reduction of open space request. And this decision from the Area Planning Commission was appealed by the applicant, and that concludes my presentation, but I will be available for any further questions.
Thank you very much. We'll hear from the applicant now and their representative, the applicant Riza Sarafta.
And the applicant is also the appellant, counsel.
It's also appellant. So you're going to speak on behalf of the applicant. Okay.
Yes.
Ben Resnick, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Is this on? Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Chairman Weezar, and members of the committee. My name is Ben Resnick with Jeffer Mangels, Butler & Mitchell. I represent the applicant here. I just got involved in the case after the Area Planning Commission just illegally denied a 4th story to this project. So in a nutshell, this is not a complicated case. What we have here is a piece of property in the middle of multifamily zone. Everything around it is R3-1. So the 8 units is permitted by the R3. The -1 is a height district 1. Height district 1 is very clear. You can build to 45 feet. Unlimited number of stories as well. So this is a 4-story project. All the projects built in the last 20 years under this zoning have been 4 stories. Some maybe 3, but mostly 4. In fact, right behind us, literally, arm's distance, is a 4-story building going up. It's not clear why the APC decided we can't have a 4th story. One person, I understand, I was not at the hearing, showed up to oppose it, and they said, oh, it's too big, it's too tall. But they didn't change the height. They just said you can't have a 4th story. It's still 45 feet. So it's an irrational, illogical decision on its face, but more importantly, there's absolutely no basis, no legal basis to deny what the zoning allows. The city does have a different height district called 1VL, one very limited, which is 3 stories or 45 feet. But ours is not that. Ours is a 1, just like everybody else in the neighborhood. And so we're entitled to a 4th story. Now here's the problem if we don't get the 4th story. This is a very narrow lot. You can only build 8 units. If you take off a story, we lose 2 units. There are 2 units per floor. If you lose 2 units, this is not an economically viable project. It's not the condo project will not get built because you have to do the same foundation, the same parking, subterranean, all of that goes into it. So the ramification is quite serious, and I wouldn't be presumed to know why the city would place itself in harm's way of creating that kind of financial loss to an applicant who's complying with your rules. Additionally, they made no findings of any adverse impact that would even support saying you're too tall, you shouldn't have 8 units, or you shouldn't have 4 stories. No findings whatsoever, because they couldn't. Because the advisory agency did the environmental review. All the findings show that this project is consistent with the community plan, with the zoning. There are no adverse impacts. Any potential impacts have been mitigated. And so there's absolutely no legal basis to deny this 4th story. With respect to this issue of the open space, it's a very minor issue. It's sort of the tail wagging the dog, but it was created because this was a 50-foot lot. The city's taking a 2-foot dedication on Idaho Street. So the lot becomes only 48 feet wide. It's a narrower lot. That creates a little hardship in meeting the requirements of an open space, and so the Director of Planning, rightfully so, made an adjustment recognizing the hardship involved because there's that dedication. So, basically what we're asking you here for today is to correct what the Area Planning Commission did. And we've submitted our letter with exhibits. The Planning Department had a PowerPoint, which I'd submitted to you again. And what I'm showing you here, you can see, and I think it's been distributed to you, our parcel is in the middle. Everything around us is in the brown shade, which is the multifamily R3-1 zone. To the north of us, the pink, that's all commercial. That's all commercial right along Santa Monica Boulevard. We've submitted photographs showing you all the 4-story buildings. And sure, the neighborhood has some older 2-story buildings, some maybe 1-story, some 3. Those are older. But ever since this area was designated medium residential R3-1, it's been built to this level. And so what you have is a spot zoning situation where one parcel is singled out, not to be able to build to what it's allowed to build. So we ask you to do that and to correct the error of the Area Planning Commission. It's what it is. The irony in all of this is that if this was an apartment building, not a condominium, it would be under construction today as a 4-story structure because there'd be no public hearings, there'd be no review. He'd just go pull a permit and build an apartment building. Maybe it's the way the Area Planning Commission is sending a message that they'd rather have apartments than condos. I don't know. There's nothing in the record to indicate why they did what they did. So with that, I ask that this be corrected. And thank you. I think I just used up my time. Is that my clock?
Yes, you could be flexible. Your representative.
Okay. Well, the only thing I would say is.
The applicant.
Thank you. But being that this is a subdivision, it's a track map for a condominium project, the city is bound to be governed by its own laws, subdivision laws, as well as the Subdivision Map Act. And the Subdivision Map Act specifically requires that if you're going to deny a project, it's got to be based on findings that the legislative body makes. Findings of fact. That means you've got to actually say it's inconsistent with something or causes adverse impacts. None of that has been found here. And so, and not only the Subdivision Map Act, but the Los Angeles Municipal Code specifically says, Section 17.06A4, that the City Council, this is on an appeal, the City Council may sustain, modify, reject, or overrule any recommendations or rulings of the Appeal Board, that's the Area Planning Commission, and shall make findings consistent with the provisions of this article and the Subdivision Map Act. So no such findings have been made to deny the 4th story. There's nothing to support that. In fact, the only findings by the professionals who handle this case, which is the planning department, the deputy advisory agency, made the findings in favor. So we ask that the committee recommend to the council that it correct the errors of the Area Planning Commission and reinstate or take out that condition J, which says you can only build 3 stories. And thank you.
Thank you. Gloria Campbell. After Gloria Campbell is Jay Ross.
Hi, my name's Gloria Campbell. I live at 1742 Stoner Avenue. My husband and I have been there as owners since 2001. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm going to read so I don't forget anything I want to say. As the attorney just indicated, the West LA Planning Commission did make a decision restricting the height of this project to 3 stories and eliminating the 10% open space reduction variance that had been made. And their decision was, we thought, very well reasoned, and it was based in the community plan. Those commissioners, I have found, look at things big picture and kind of holistically. And they're appointed by the mayor, they're approved by the council. These are smart people. I think they made the right decision. Also, on the very same block as this proposed development, at 1641 South Stoner, it's on the same block as a proposed demolition of 2 one-story houses and the building of a 4-story condominium. And just a few weeks ago, the zoning administrator, J.C. Romero Navarro, and the planning director determined that a 4-story building was not warranted because no other 4-story buildings exist on the block, and that it was not in keeping with the community plan. The ruling specifically indicates that the approval was for a maximum of 3 stories, and a copy of that ruling was provided to you. And unlike what the attorney said, we did our own little photos and drawings of the block. I think you received this. Here's more copies if you want to take a look. So the stipulation was made for a property on the very same block. And if the planning director already agrees that the community plan can be used to limit height, we've established that precedent. And can I talk anymore? I'll make a talk. Okay.
You could wrap it up.
Okay. The 10% open space. We don't have enough open space in our neighborhood as it is. You see kids playing out on the streets, on the parking. If I did my math right, they would have 350 square feet of flat open space in this development, and with 8 units, that means every family gets, a 6x7 space. Not very much. Okay, to wrap it up, we understand that the developer.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Jay Ross.
Good evening, gentlemen. I have a lot of points, but I'll be brief. Here's the case that she's referring to, August 30th, exact same project, demolition of 2 one-story houses with 1-story house, 2-story apartment, 1-story house, exact same project down the street. Mike LeGrand signed this for the record. You have precedent. Your planning director agrees with it, this case. Mike LeGrand obviously believes there is merit in J.C. Romero's decision. The West LA Planning Commission made the exact same decision. There are lawyers on that commission. They know real estate law. It doesn't matter if he goes in to build apartments because building permits for apartments can be appealed eventually, so that doesn't make a difference. I ask you not to be intimidated by large, expensive lawyers. I'm sorry I lost my breath. I actually had to take my day off work and run down here from Agora Hills. They said, when you make your decision, I hope you will make your decision based on the fact that 85% of the buildings within a 4-block quadrant are 3 stories or less. They made a list of 5 stories that are 4-story buildings. I provided in my testimony a list of 45 buildings and houses that are 3 stories or less in the 4-block quadrant. So I hope that when you're making your decision, you will not just let them cherry pick a few big buildings. We live here. We created this general plan, this community plan. They're kind of trying to create new parts of the general plan, which they can't. It has to go through council. They're saying recent development trends, there's 5 new 4-story buildings. They say that's more important than what's been there. If stuff was built in the 30s, 40s, 50s, it's there. It's existing. That's what you judge it on. That's the neighborhood character. That's what the West LA Area Planning Commission saw. Just so you know, in the record, there's a signed resolution from the West LA Neighborhood Council who also supports us. I work for a developer too, and I'll just tell you, my understanding is the City Council and Planning Department cannot make decisions based on the financial implication of the developer, so I don't know why they bring that up. The community wrote the general plan. Character of the community overrides any financial interest of the developer. I work for a developer. We never close escrow on land until we know exactly what we can build. Do I have any more time, or is that it?
That's it.
If you have any questions, I'm available. Thank you.
Thank you. Representing Council District 11, Noel Fleming.
Good afternoon, members of the Plum Committee. Councilmember Bonham believes it is important for projects to be designed to respect the character and scale of their immediate surroundings. A well-designed project that is consistent with the context of the surrounding community and in scale with neighboring properties can be a positive addition to the community. After considering the character of the area surrounding the proposed project and weighing input from community members, the West LA Planning Commissioners voted unanimously to limit this project to 3 stories in order to ensure that the project would respect the character and scale of the neighborhood and also be consistent with the community plan. Although there may be other 4-story structures in the West LA area, the area immediately surrounding this project is composed mostly of 1- and 2-story structures. Therefore, Councilmember Bonin believes that the project should be limited to 3 stories in height so that the project will be more compatible with its surroundings, and accordingly, he agrees with the decision of the West LA Planning Commission. The councilmember respectfully asks the Plum Committee to deny the applicant's appeal and to sustain the decision of the West LA Planning Commission. The councilmember also asks the Plum Committee to make revisions to the project findings as follows. Revise finding B on page F2 of the West LA APC transmittal as follows. First, amend subheading B to read, as conditioned, the design and improvement of the proposed subdivision are consistent with applicable general and specific plans. And second, amend paragraph 2 under subheading B to read, based on evidence in the record showing that there are no 4-story buildings on the 1600 block of Stoner Avenue, that none of the adjacent lots are improved with a 4-story structure, that 85% of the structures in a 4-block quadrant are 3 stories or less, that the Planning Department has limited another project at 1641 South Stoner Avenue on the same block to 3 stories or less, that although there are other 4-story buildings in the area, none are on this particular block. Continued, a 4-story structure would not be consistent with the community plan and would set a precedent that would adversely affect the character of the neighborhood, as the vast majority of structures in the neighborhood are 1 to 2 stories. Therefore, the project shall be limited to 3 stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? If I could ask the Planning Department to come up, please. Now, as I understand it, APC limited this project to 3 stories, but what's allowable is 45 feet.
That is correct.
So, in this case or any other case that we do, why not make limitations based on feet rather than stories?
That was a decision made by the Area Planning Commission. They made a call, they make a motion to limit the development to 3 stories. We made a presentation showing photographs of other buildings, and we established clearly to the Area Planning Commission that the maximum height based on the height district was 45 feet. But they made a decision they put the language there. It didn't have anything to do with the motion.
Okay. All right. And so, is it possible that this developer, or in any other instance where we limit the height by floors instead of actual feet, that, let's say, a three-floor building is now built up to 45 feet?
See, the issue is the argument from the Area Planning Commission is character, that the 4-story development is incompatible in character. The height district doesn't mention the number of stories like in 1 AVL, like height district 1 VL or XL, that specifically says 3 or 2 stories. Height district 1 established only 4 or 5 feet height maximum, but it doesn't say anything about the number of stories. And driving around the area, I found buildings that are 3 stories, but they have a very high ceiling. They're almost 45 feet in height. So the wording of 3 stories that was put by the Area Planning Commission. That's all.
So our code talks about feet, right?
Yes.
And now we're asking a developer to build something or not build something based on floor. Is there a problem with that as we move forward? Are we exposing ourselves to any type of
That opens a
incongruity?
can here, because if the code is silent, we don't have much. We don't have a say in terms of the number of stories in the High District 1. Again, the code is silent on that. It doesn't specify the maximum number of stories or the minimum number of stories. So it establishes only height.
Shouldn't we correct the APC then and tell them, look, we get what you're trying to do, but why don't you go back and fix this? Because, look, we measure how we allow or not allow in our code based upon feet. I mean, it's a very blatant mistake that was made. So how do we allow this to go forward if they're using a measuring stick that's different from what's in the code?
Well, there's a possibility to go back and make them correct the.
Let me ask the city attorney then. How can we fix this, or what's? I get the intent of the APC.
There's, council member. There's no mechanism for this committee to send it back to the APC. So the matter's in front of you, and you can approve, conditionally approve, or disapprove. I mean, you have the full discretion. So.
Okay. So let me ask the city attorney a question. Is there a legal basis then for to restrict this to 3 stories?
If the code is silent, you just have the finding in the MAP Act that I think is the basis for the amended finding that the council deputy read into the record. And it's that the design or improvement of the proposed subdivision is not consistent with applicable general and specific plans. So as conditioned, the council office, by the testimony that they referred to and others, are saying that the predominant character is, I'm just repeating what they said, is 3 stories or less. So that's what you have before you. There's no prohibition on going by stories. This is a discretionary approval. It's a map that was applied for. So, the fact that if it was an apartment, it's by right. That's a different project. This one's discretionary.
So before we move forward, though, I mean, I wouldn't want to do something that's illegal. We take an action that's illegal. So, as our counselor, are you advising us that what they did in APC was legal?
What I'm saying is, it's for this committee to look at the findings, and we're zeroing in on one specific finding, and you need to be able to make that finding based on substantial evidence in the record. So that's, I can read it to you again. It's that the design or improvement of the proposed subdivision is not consistent with the applicable general and specific plans. So that's the that's the issue. You've got testimony from and comments from the attorney for the subdivider, and you've got testimony from some community members and some statistics from the planning deputy, and you need to look at those and decide whether or not you can make that finding as conditioned or not. So it's within the discretion of the committee.
Right. Have we approved or disapproved other projects like this when, let's say, the zoning administrator or the APC is using one measuring stick and the code has a different measuring stick? I mean, has there been another instance where, an area planning commission says, hey, we want to restrict this to 2 stories or whatever, but the code is different?
I'm not aware of any action by another area planning commission doing the same thing.
Yeah. Mr. LeGrand, our planning director, are you aware of any other cases like this?
Michael LeGrand for the record. Yes, I've seen cases mostly on appeal of the APC where they've limited height based off of stories or number of units, and usually it falls back on the existing characteristics of the neighborhood or findings that can be made in the community plan. My suggestion is if you want to go down that path, you may give staff direction to look into those findings and work with the city attorney and to come back at your next meeting with some more findings of fact to look at some of the circumstances that have been raised today.
And I assume each floor we have certain requirements as to how high each floor can be, correct?
Those are building and safety specific rules, and usually is if there is a habitable room in a certain level, that's considered a story.
Okay, so can this developer then say, I still want to do 45 feet, and I'm going to do 3 floors, but they're all going to be 45, it's going to reach...
Well, there are buildings, again, when I was driving around yesterday, there was a 3-story building, and they had high ceilings, so it was almost 45 feet. So.
Yeah, okay. And let me give the opportunity to the applicant. Yes,
Thank
sir?
you. Yeah, so the rationality of the decision is that number of stories, there's no height limit as to what a story can be. So you can build 3 stories a full 45 feet. You can add lofts on the top floor. You can hit 45 feet. But here's where the rubber meets the road, really, because what you heard from your city attorney is, well, if they make a finding that it's inconsistent with a general plan, they can then limit you to 3 stories. And the answer is no, because follow this logic. There's a general plan that says this is medium residential, which already defines what the intensity of uses are. Then you put a zoning on it called R3, which allows the density, and then you put a height limit on it, specifically by ordinance. You legislate it, that says I can go to 45 feet, unlimited stories. That's for the entire area in the neighborhood. That was the vision of the general plan for the future. That's how you wanted development to happen. If you take the position that every time someone comes in for an application like this, you look at what's next door to him, or down the street, or on the block, you can never implement your general plan. You can never implement your zoning, because there's always going to be something that's less, that's older, that's from before. So how can you make a finding that we're not consistent with the general plan in this case? So there is no basis or facts. Just because people say there are 2-story buildings around there, that's not a fact that makes it a conclusion that we're inconsistent with the plan, because the plan is the opposite. The plan tells you you go more dense in this area and you go to 4 stories because it allows for this zone. So this is backwards. This logic is saying that we're going to ignore the general plan, we're going to ignore the zone, and it's an ad hoc planning. If you're lucky, you get to build 4 stories. If you got some people complaining, you don't. What kind of planning is that? I mean, the idea is that someone should rely and be able to rely on the zone and rely on the general plan. And so,
okay, thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Well, we could look at this 2 ways, I think. One way to look at it is that it's not consistent with the general and specific plans, because as we would like to measure things, we use feet, but yet the Area Planning Commission is telling us do it by floors. Or you could say it is consistent, but the developer has, built 3 floors as long as you're not higher than 45 feet. That's the other way of looking at it. So we heard from the council office. We give deference to what they are like to see, or how they interpret things. I'm going to, at their request, move this to council and deny the appeal and sustain the Area Planning Commission's decision. But I have reservations about adopting their findings, because I'm of the opinion that I don't agree with the first finding, which is that it is consistent with the general and specific plans. So I'm moving it forward hesitantly, and I'm going to support this, and I'll give my colleague, Mr. Cedillo, let his views be known. But I reserve, I want to just make clear that needs to be looked upon before we vote upon it at council. And this issue may come up again. We voted for it before like that, but I think we need some clarification, not only for this project, but for future projects, when we're being directed to do one thing using one measuring stick, and we use different types of measuring sticks. But it depends how you want to interpret what the direction was. So I'll move that we deny the appeal and sustain the West LA APC's decision, and adopt the findings presented by CD11, but I'm just expressing my reservations about that and my concern that I may express my doubts in council after further considering where we are with this. Mr. Cedillo, anything? Or okay. Thank you. So we'll make that the order of this committee. It's so ordered. Thank you. Any other business?
Comment, Councilman.
Mr. Cherno. Robert Cherno.
Good afternoon again. I'm a little bothered by the fact that there are certain individuals that have been appointed to commissioners that are sitting in judgment at others while they themselves are in violation of the law. Central Area Planning Commission, Franklin Acevedo, under the city charter, he's required to live within the boundaries of the commission. In fact, he moved 2.5 years ago to Pasadena. I've approached him on this. I've asked him to voluntarily resign. He has refused to do so. I'm asking that this committee, in fact, requests that staff look into this matter and place this on a future agenda. There's also the matter of the San Vicente Design Review Board. There are 2 members on there, and under the municipal code, and I've given you a copy of it, they are allowed to serve 2 4-year terms. One of them, her 4-year term expired 15 years ago, and she continues to be on. The other one, 5 years. And the reason we bring this up is my own staff has had difficulty with them. They are abusive. They don't follow the codes. And when we found out about this, we were very disturbed. So again, I'm asking that this matter staff be asked to look into these matters. Mr. Legrand's senior staff has told me that they don't know how to approach this. I'm asking that this committee, in fact, look into this and have it on a future agenda so we can discuss why it is that people who are sitting in judgment of others themselves are allegedly violating the law. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other business? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.